Hello, welcome to this short uh, podcast on data filtering. We're going to do this in Mathematica, and what we would like to show you here is how to filter data for some criteria or some characteristic. And we're going to show you three different ways to do that in Mathematica. So we're going to start out with some data here. It's just an arbitrary data set. I have two columns of 10 rows. And what we want to do is we want to filter this data, filter out and keep all of the data that has a y value greater than 40. So that should give us the last three rows of this particular data set. Many people in computer science are familiar with what's known as the do construct, a do loop, or an if statement. So we're going to use a do if construct here as our first method of filtering out this data. So I'm going to create an empty data set here called do if data. So this is sort of a holding list where our data is going to go when we do the filtering. And so I'm just doing an empty list there. I'm going to suppress that there so it doesn't appear here. So we're going to start off with a do loop here, and typical Mathematica, we start out with our square brackets. Then I'm going to have an if statement, and what I want to do is I want to look at all of the rows and column 2, because column 2 is where I'm doing my filtering. Okay, so if I'm going to check each row starting at 1 and going through 10, and I'm going to use a greater than equal sign space there, and that's going to give me the greater than equal than symbol. Okay, if any of those rows in column 2 are greater than 40, then I'm going to put into my a list of data called do if data. I'm going to append into do if data. I want to put data, all of the data in all of the rows in that spot. Okay, and notice how many square brackets I need to close that. Okay. So again, what this is doing is it's appending into the list do if data all of the rows. Okay. So what I need to do at this point is I need to define what row means. Row means going from the first row to the length of data, and in this case that's going to be, I could have put row 1 column 10 in there, but if I add something to my data later on, I don't want to have to go back and modify that code. And now I'm going to close the do statement. I'm going to look at my code there. I don't see anything purple, which means I have good code here. I'm going to go up under evaluate and evaluate the whole notebook. And what you should notice here is I didn't get any results. That's because we don't get any results from a do statement. So I'm going to use the grid command, and I'm going to grid my do if data, and I'm going to put a nice frame around it. And there we go. Okay, we got the last three columns of the data. If I were to go up here and change this to less than or equal to 40, then I would get the first 7 columns. Okay, so that's the first method of doing this with a traditional computer science do if statement. The next thing that I can do is use what's called a select command in Mathematica. So I'm going to call my data set, my results data set, select data. And what I'm going to say is I'm going to select all the data, and I want all of it. And I'm going to use now what's known as a slot or a mapping function. I'm going to use a pound sign here and bracket 2. What that means is map this selection to all of the data in column number 2. And once again, I want to do a greater than equal sign, space. hit that space bar. That's going to give me the greater than equal sign. And then there's my selection criteria. And now because I'm using a sort of a mapping function here with a slot, I use the ampersand symbol, okay, to close that off. And now I'm going to close off my select command, and that's all I need for this statement. So let's go ahead. I'm going to evaluate my whole notebook here, and notice that I got the same data. If I want to make it look prettier, and I do, I can use select data, frame all, and there we go. I get the same three sets of data. So what you should notice there is, in the traditional computer programming approach, I needed a large number of, or a bigger number of commands using the built-in capabilities, the functional capabilities of Mathematica. I can do this all much simply. This is a little bit more esoteric and a little harder to read for people not familiar with Mathematica. Computer science people would recognize immediately what we're doing with the do-if construct. But this is a little bit more cryptic with the Mathematica notation. But it turns out to be, it's better code in Mathematica. Okay, the final approach is using the map function in Mathematica. So I'm going to start out there with a, we're going to build a list here. So in that list, I'm going to say, once again, I'm going to use the slot feature here. I'm going to say, I want to display all of column 1, and I want to display all of column 2. And so after my closed list there, once again, I need to use the ampersand because that's the symbol for a mapping function. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use delete cases, and I want to delete cases out of data. And now this is a little cryptic type of thing. I'm going to use a different mapping function here, the A ampersand, and I'm going to say A is represented by column 2. And in this case, because I'm deleting, I want to do things less than 40 and go from there. So I'm using the mapping function here. So you see this is a little bit more involved code here. But once again, I get my 3 rows there, and I'm going to suppress that. I'm once again going to use actually, I don't want to use the grid there. I don't want to suppress that. I'm going to actually put my grid around all of this here. So I'm going to put my grid all around all of this here. And then I get the nice, pretty 3 rows again. So what we've shown you in this podcast are 3 different ways of filtering out data for some specific criteria. We use the standard computer science do-if approach. We use the select and mapping function in Mathematica to do that. And we use an explicit map and delete cases here to also do that. Hope this helps, and we'll see you next time.